My PowerPoint skills are not as strong as David's, but I'm going to give it a shot here. Really, the central theme behind the first 12 verses of Ecclesiastes is this idea of chasing happiness. In fact, as David talked to us last class, the entire book of Ecclesiastes is one man's journal in how he tried literally everything that could be tried to find fulfillment and happiness in life. And he's sharing those notes with us, and he's sharing his conclusion with us. And so before we dive into the text, I want to talk about this idea of chasing happiness. There is this concept called the hedonic adaptation or hedonic treadmill. And I don't know if you've heard of this, but I want to spend just a couple of minutes talking about it. It's this idea that as human beings, we're constantly looking out into the future for things that will fulfill our desires, right? So we have something that we want to obtain. Maybe it's a new car, maybe it's a new house, maybe it's other material things, promotion at work, whatever it is that you want to pursue, and then you strive to get it. You do everything you get that, because if I can get this raise, I'll be happier. If I can buy this car, I'll be happier. Whatever it is, right? We obtain the thing, and we really enjoy it. So if you're measuring happiness levels, you've got the thing that you were looking for, your happiness level goes up, but then what happens? You adapt. And then your happiness level starts to go back down, and you're right back where you were before. And then you look to the next thing, right? You might say, hey, I bought a new Corvette. It is awesome. I love this Corvette. But after a while, you're like, yeah, I got a car. It's my car. What I really want is a Lamborghini. And that's an extreme example, but we do that kind of thing all the time. And so researchers have found that typically everyone has some base level of happiness. A positive event occurs in your life, something you were striving for, you obtained it, you were happy for a while, and then you adapt it. Something else positive happens, you're happy, then you adapt it. Same thing works on the negative side, where you encounter something negative in your life, and maybe your base happiness goes down below, like you're depressed or you're sad or whatever it is, but then you adapt and you come back. And it's the reason why you could be living your life making a certain amount of salary and have some sort of constant level of happiness, and then you get a raise, and before long you're exactly at that same level of happiness you were at before. So money, in other words, can't increase your happiness. It won't permanently increase your happiness. And there's a couple of reasons for this that I want to share with you. There are sort of three things that are happening that can lead to this, researchers say. One is called shifting adaptation levels. And that is, we've kind of talked about that a little bit, where you get the raise and you adapt to it. And now you're used to living at a level where you're making a certain amount of money and you're going out to eat more and you're doing these things that you do when you have more money. It just becomes a part of your normal everyday life. There's desensitization. Imagine living in a war zone where at first it would be incredibly shocking and incredibly jarring to live someplace where you were constantly worried about getting injured or whatever, all of the horrors of war. But after a while, if you're living in a war zone for a long time, it becomes the new normal. You're desensitized to that. So your happiness just stabilizes again. And the last thing is called sensitization. And an example of that is, and forgive me for using an alcohol example, but like if you're into wine, if you really like wine, you're going to want more and more wine experiences, and you're going to start trying more and more expensive wines, go to wine tastings and all of those kinds of things, that you become sensitized to it, that it takes more sophisticated wine in order to give you that same sense of happiness when you're drinking wine. I hope that makes sense. And so these are the things that are taking place, I think, underneath the surface of what Solomon is trying to tell us. That he is someone who had every bit of money and opportunity to go out and try to increase his base level of happiness, through any number of different ways. And what he found out was there really is no permanent fix to that. There are lots of people who write books and different things about how to escape being trapped in this treadmill. And one of the reasons why, to go back to the previous slide, one of the reasons why they call it a treadmill, this is a hamster wheel, but is because you're standing in the same place the whole time, right? You're not getting anywhere. You keep attaining more and more and more things, reaching more and more goals, but you're essentially in the same place in terms of how happiness works. And so some of the things that I find it very ironic that you will read, particularly in secular literature around how to escape this, is three things. Number one, instead of the destination, enjoy the journey. So stop thinking about what you're trying to obtain and be more mindful of where you are, right? So like if you're trying to run a marathon and that's your goal, instead of waiting to be happy once you actually run that marathon, find happiness in whatever you're accomplishing in the moment during your training. A lot of things about mindfulness. The second thing is expressing gratitude for what you do have. Being on the hedonic treadmill will cause you to look into the future and look for things that you don't have and miss all the things you do have. This is a trivial story, but it reminded me of the first time I bought a Kindle. I was like, I need a Kindle. This thing is awesome. I'm going to read so many more books if I have a Kindle. When Maggie falls asleep at night while we're watching TV, I can just pick up my Kindle and I don't have to turn the lights on. I don't have to get out of bed. It's going to be great. Meanwhile, there's a stack of books on my night table like this. And I'm like, well, what makes me think I'm going to read more books on this device if I'm not even reading the books I have? Well, because I need a light at night or I need to go in another room. So I made myself read the books that I had before I bought the Kindle. And it helped me kind of escape that pattern, right? I had more gratitude for what I did have rather than what I was looking for. And then the last one was, and this is the one that really gets me, instead of what, start with why. And I like this quote here. It says, life is not primarily a quest for pleasure, as Freud believed, or a quest for power, as Adler taught, but a quest for meaning. The great task for any person is to find meaning in his or her life. And I think what we're going to find when we read Ecclesiastes is that's exactly what Solomon discovered as well. And unfortunately for him, he realized that he had the meaning in the very beginning all along and didn't realize it. And I think that's probably, unfortunately, true for us sometimes as well. So I'm going to pause there. I've said a lot of things. Any thoughts, comments on this whole idea of chasing happiness? Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It didn't do anything to raise his base level of happiness. Yeah. Wow, 2 trillion, that's a lot. Any other thoughts? Okay, so we've been talking about chasing happiness. What Solomon is talking about is chasing the wind. You know, vanity of vanities. That concept, that phrase, depending on how it's translated, is the same thing as this concept of chasing the wind. So let's dig into it. Why should we listen to Solomon in the first place? Well, I want to highlight a couple of verses from tonight's readings. Verse 1 says, the words of the preacher, the son of David, king in Jerusalem. Verse 12 says, I, the preacher, have been king over Jerusalem, over Israel in Jerusalem. So who is this person that is about to give us the results of their test? We know he's king in Jerusalem, but this is not from the king. This book is not written from the king. This is not the king telling us the way things are. Who is this from? What capacity is this person writing in? This might be too easy a question. It's not a trick question. Yes? But in what capacity is he writing this book? Isn't inspired? That's true, but he tells us in these verses, the preacher. Sometimes it's called the quester. Sometimes he's called the teacher. There's different translations. But it's interesting to me that he is the king. He is a son of David. Those are very important credentials, right? Yes, we should listen to him. But he is telling us this not from that point of view. He's telling us from the point of view of a teacher, a preacher, somebody that is trying to make sure to impart some knowledge to us, to share the benefit of what he's learned the hard way. And I think it's important to point that out because, I think it changes kind of your mindset a little bit in terms of how you receive this information. So let's dig into his credentials just a little bit more. He is king over all of Israel, and there are only 3 kings that qualify for that statement, unless I'm incorrect. Who are the 3 kings that were king over all Israel? Saul, David, and Solomon? I wasn't including Saul for some reason in my count. Who was after Solomon? Rehoboam. Does he not count? Maybe I was wrong, but I was thinking Solomon, David, Solomon, and Rehoboam. But I don't know why I didn't think of Saul. There's 4 kings. Well, we know it's not Saul, right? We know it's not David because it says the son of David. Could it be Rehoboam who wrote this? Probably not. He wasn't too smart a guy, was he? He made a really bad choice and listened to the wrong people very early in his reign, which did not last very long. So it has to be Solomon. Is Solomon qualified to teach us anything? What do you think? And if you think yes, why? Wisest man who ever lived, okay? Anything else? Yes. It means to study all of the things, absolutely. Means, motive, and opportunity, right? Those. Let's look in 1 Kings and see what we find here. I'm going to read from 1 Kings 4, 29 through 34. God gave Solomon wisdom, very great insight, and understanding as vast as the sand on the seashore. Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East, greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone, wiser than Ethan the Ezrahite and Herman, Calcol, and Darda, sons of Mahol. His reputation extended to all the surrounding nations. Solomon composed 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He described trees from the cedar in Lebanon to the hyssop growing out of the wall. He also taught about animals, birds, reptiles, and fish. People came from everywhere, sent by every king on earth who had heard of his wisdom to listen to Solomon's wisdom. Okay, these are the things that jump out to me in this passage. Let's look at how many times that it references something that gives Saul credentials to teach us something. He had wisdom that came from God, right? We talked about that. He also had an understanding as vast as the sand on the seashore. And we know that's not uncommon language in the Bible when it talks about the sands on the seashores. That means a lot, even more than 2 trillion, right? So his insights and his understanding was as vast as that. His wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East. And, at that time, if you've ever been through Spaceship Earth at Walt Disney World, you know about the fire that destroyed the library in Alexandria. all of the wisdom of humankind was saved because of all of the wise men in the East who had copied those texts and had been studying and teaching them. And they call it in the ride at Disney World the world's first backup system, for those Disney fans out there. So, but he was wiser than all of that. He was wiser than anyone in Egypt. He was wiser than all of these people who I didn't make anyone else read, whose names I didn't pronounce correctly. And he had a reputation in all of the nations. Now, this next section is interesting to me. He composed 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. What does that tell us about him? Multi-talented. Yeah, what's a proverb? A wise saying. Well, so it makes sense that he would write thousands of proverbs if he was the wisest person that ever lived. But 1,005 songs, which is oddly specific number, 1,005 songs he wrote, I think shows just this, there's different types of intelligence and there's different areas in life that we can be proficient in. And he was, wise in the ways of the world, but he was also artistic. He had an artist brain, and he could process things in that way, and he could express emotions musically. And I think that's amazing. He also described trees, and from the cedars in Lebanon to the hyssop growing out of the wall. What does that make him? And what is that? Naturalist and botanist. Yes, those are the two things that came to my mind. He's a botanist. He's going around, and to your point earlier, he had the opportunity to go around and go, oh, look at this. Let me draw this. Let me write it down. Let me give it a name. He's cataloging all of these things. He is also taught about animals, birds, reptiles, and fish. What does that make him? Zoologist, a biologist, right? Whatever. He's a scientist, right? And he didn't just understand about animals and birds, etc. He taught. He taught people about these things. And what people? People from everywhere. He taught people from all over the known world. He taught them wise sayings. He taught them his songs. He taught them about nature. He taught them about animals. Every king on earth sent people to hear him because he was wise, to listen to his wisdom. So, does he have the authority to teach us something? Absolutely he does, right? What is he going to teach us? That's the question. What's the message? What is the takeaway from what Solomon is about to say to us? Anybody remembers this character from Prisoner of Azkaban? He's talking about Sirius Black and how hard he is to catch. He escaped Azkaban. And he says it's like trying to catch smoke with your bare hand. That's exactly what Solomon is saying in verse 2. Vanity of vanities, says the preacher, vanity of vanities, all is vanity. Chasing happiness is like trying to catch smoke with your bare hands. Have you ever done that? Have you ever tried to catch smoke with your hands? What's going to happen if you grab at a bunch of smoke? Let's say you have a bonfire in your backyard. What's going to happen if you try to do that? If you do catch something, it's going to come out between your fingers. I mean, it's fleeting, right? You're not going to be able to go, yeah, I'm going to save this for later, right? You can't do it. The same thing is true about happiness. You might feel like you've got something, but that happiness is going to slip through your fingers. It's momentary. We've already talked a little bit about that. So before we jump into the text, to get the next level of detail about catching smoke in our bare hands, does anybody have any thoughts or comments they want to share so far? Yeah. Yeah. Half of it has not been told. Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I can imagine you could spend weeks and weeks and weeks with Solomon and still not even touch the surface of what he actually knew. I don't know if any of you have ever been around somebody like that. I've had the opportunity a few times in my life to be around somebody in whatever field it is that they're an expert, where every word that comes out of their mouth is something that I feel like if I don't write this down, I will never remember it. It just won't hold in my brain. Like I literally am talking to this person going, could you repeat that again? And I imagine that's what it was like with Solomon. Any other thoughts? Terry? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And we know that God blessed him with more than just wisdom, right? He gave him riches and he gave him everything he needed to rule the kingdom well. And the kingdom, it's one of my favorite movies is You've Got Mail. Do not judge. Um, Nora Ephron is a genius. And there's a quote in that movie where Tom Hanks is telling what's his name? I can't remember. He's telling him to get back to work, and he goes, "I don't have anything to do. This place is a well-oiled machine." Israel was a well-oiled machine. Silver was so abundant it was like gravel on the streets. And so Solomon had a lot of time. He had a lot of time on his hands because the kingdom was kind of running itself. And I think you're right. I think he took every opportunity, not just to impart knowledge, but to gain it wherever he could. Dan?
I think it's one of the ways that to describe getting out of this cycle of trying to fix that in it. What a lot of people struggle is they feel the, and so they know it exists, and that's why they're reaching after it. But when you think about it, that feeling that you get is not anything or you existing in an environment that allows you to experience that. All these things Solomon did, trying to somehow gain control of ultimately, you might get a portion of control, you might not, but if you experience you
That is an excellent comment. Yes, absolutely. And that made me think of, so I've had struggles with anxiety. And one of the things that I talked about a minute ago to escape being trapped on the treadmill is mindfulness and meditation, right? And one of the ways that I was taught to deal with my anxiety is you always think that, oh no, I can feel the anxiety coming. I have to stop it. I can't let it come. But the more you fight anxiety, the worse that it is. So through meditation and mindfulness, you learn to let it come, to just let it come. And sometimes I would do this exercise where I would imagine sitting in a glass box and anxiety would come up and knock on and I would say, come on in. Like, I know you're coming. I'm not fighting it. Just come here, and I'm just going to sit with you for a while. I'm just going to sit with my anxiety for a while, and eventually it goes away. Same thing with negative thoughts. If you envision your thoughts being cars on a road that are driving past you, and you go, oh boy, here's a really negative thought, and I don't want to deal with this thought at all, and I better chase after it. That's your inclination. I got to go chase it. No, actually you don't. You don't have to entertain that thought at all. Just envision it driving past you, and there it goes. And that's exactly, I think, what you're saying, Dan, with desires and happiness. Just because you see the wind or wind's effects, or you feel the wind, it doesn't mean you have to go chasing after it. Yeah, so I really like that. Any other thoughts, Corey? Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's right. And it's like those three suggestions that I gave earlier, that last one especially about finding meaning. Whoever wrote that was probably very proud of themselves to think of, well, meaning is what you really need in your life. Missing out on the point that the ultimate meaning is to serve God. I've always found that anything I read, and especially in scientific literature, a barometer of whether or not I think it's going to be true is if it supports what God has been telling us all along, right? All right, so let's look at the text. I'm going to read 3 through 11. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. The wind blows to the south and goes around to the north. Around and around goes the wind, and on its circuits the wind returns. All streams run to the sea, but the sea is not full. To the place where the streams flow, there they flow again. All things are full of weariness. A man cannot utter it. The eye is not satisfied with seeing, nor the ear filled with hearing. What has been is what will be, and what has been done is what will be done, and there is nothing new under the sun. Is there a thing of which it is said, see, this is new? It has been already in the ages before us. There is no remembrance of former things, nor will there be any remembrance of later things yet to be among those who come after. So before we take this in individual sections, I just want to talk about this phrase for a minute. What does man gain by all the toil at which he toils under the sun? Why did Solomon add that phrase, under the sun? What's he mean to convey by that? Yeah, I think that's right. I think that he's saying this topic that we're about to dig into, this experiment that I've conducted, these things that I'm sharing with you have to do with all of human existence, right? All of everything that you might ever think to try to do, this applies to that, right? This is not some like esoteric, like thought experiment. We're not talking about spiritual realms that we have no way of knowing about. This is human existence. Any other thoughts on that? On Earth, yes. Right, exactly. Yes. Dan?
How does he get throughout the rest of the Bible all there's do this and get a book for a moment where it's somebody from human perspective going, I wanted it from that way. I wanted it for myself.
Yeah.
And so just, I mean, obviously the Bible requires, yeah, but just the kind of perspective shift of it thought my love, love,
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah, Lindsay? What, watching YouTube, is that what you said? Oh, oh. Yeah, yeah, like a little warning on the bottom of the TV screen, do not try this at home, right? Okay, let's dig into it a little bit. Verses 4 through 6 here. The idea behind this section is that nothing changes. It says here in verse 4 that the earth remains forever. In verse 5, it says the sun always rises. It goes up in the morning, it goes down in the evening, but you're guaranteed that the next day it's going to go up again. The wind always blows, whether it blows north or south, east or west, it's always blowing. These things are always happening. What are we supposed to do with that? What is this meant to teach us? God is consistent. Okay, I like that. What? Yeah, I honestly never thought of that interpretation of this, but yeah, absolutely. I think you can find contentment in it, for sure. And out of our control. Okay. Anybody else? Yeah. All right. Yeah. Steve? Yeah. That's kind of what I think everything everybody said was right. But that's kind of where my head was at. And I was thinking about Steve Jobs. You know, he's famous for saying that he wanted to make a dent in the universe, and that's what drove him. He wanted to change the universe. And he did it with the iPhone. Did he? Did anything change? I think these verses tell us that nothing, literally nothing changed. It might look new, it might be shinier, it might have a different, kind of surface to it, but underneath it all the same. It's the same as it ever was, right? So what does that mean for us? If everything stays the same, nothing really changes, what's our takeaway? Lou? Let God be in charge, yeah. So the takeaway is if nothing changes, why are you spending so much time and energy to try to change things? Because it's not going to work. Did somebody else have a hand up? Oh, wasn't our purpose to change? Yeah, to make a dent in the universe? Yeah. I mean, I'm glad he came up with the iPhone, but I don't think it changed anything. It may have changed things for the worse, actually. Yes. Yes. Yeah. I agree. And I think each one of these sections that we're going to go over all point in that same direction. So it's a good segue. What does 7 and 8 tell us? So nothing changes, 4 through 6. 7 and 8, nothing satisfies. The sea never fills up. Rivers are constantly pouring into the sea. You would think it would fill up, but it's never going to. It never has more than, well, tides rise, but it never fills up. This is one that always gets me. Our eyes never see enough, and our ears never hear enough. It's like, I complain about this sometimes. You eat a meal that's like one of your favorite meals, and you just love it, and you can't eat enough of it. Or maybe let's say you've actually eaten the perfect amount, and you're just super satisfied. And I'm like, why can't I be satisfied from now on? Like, I've eaten my fill. Can't I just be satisfied? Nope. I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night and I'm going to be hungry again. Like, how is it? And you You can't watch enough of your favorite movies. You can't listen to enough of your favorite songs. You can't build enough Lego sets to be happy permanently, because you always want more. Nothing satisfies. And to dig into that a little bit more, what do you think it means in verse 8 when it says, all things are full of weariness, man cannot utter it? Any thoughts on that? Trying. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. It comes from all of the labor and the work and the striving and the whatever, that being on that treadmill, staying in the same place, trying to get farther and farther, um, and not getting anywhere really, right? I think one translation said all things are meaningless. That you just labor to the point of just meaninglessness. It's to the point you can't even really fully even utter how weary it is trying to chase after these desires. I remember, so the first house Maggie and I ever bought, I want to say it was 900 square feet, a teeny tiny house. I mean, like we could probably put it in our living room now. But I look back at that time and I'm like, wow, it was a really happy time. A lot of great things happened in that house. It was a really happy time. But at the time I was like, this is a tiny house. I can't wait to sell it for more so I can buy a bigger house. It's that kind of thing, that constantly looking for something new and not being satisfied with what you have. Yeah. Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next section, verses 9 and 10. So nothing changes, nothing satisfied. 9 and 10 tells us nothing is new. History always repeats itself. You read the thing where it says something like, for those who don't understand history are doomed to repeat it. I think we're doomed to repeat it even if we understand it or not. It's all been tried before, Solomon tells us. Even if you get excited about something new, you're not thinking about it right because it's been done before. I mean, the Romans probably did everything there is to do, every which way you could think. You might think that the internet is new because it's like technology, but it's not. It's just maybe it's a faster form of communication, but it's still the same problems that we've always had. And so my question is, why are we fooled constantly by things thinking that they're new when in fact nothing is new? I think part of it is, when you're young, things are new to you. And what's that? Packaging, the packaging does make a difference. And if we're looking forward and thinking of trying to find things that we desire to increase our happiness, it's almost like you convince yourself that it's new because, oh, well, this is new. This will give me happiness. I think the problem is inside of us rather than outside of us. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I think that's right. And I'm not condemning social media when I say this, but Facebook was the thing, and then it was Twitter, and then it was Instagram, and then it's TikTok, and then whatever the timeline is. But one rises and then falls, and another one rises, and ooh, look at this new platform. It's different because you can only do 180 characters. But it's the same problems. It's the same thing, right? Same potential pitfalls anyway. Did I see another hand over here? Oh, Mary. Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It seems new because we forgot the past. Were you? Or I didn't know if you were scratching or. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good point. In fact, we talk about the vapor. We've been talking about vapor or smoke being the thing that we're chasing after, but we're in a sense that way too, right? Our lives are like that. But he's permanent. He stays the same. I think it was Chuck who said, constancy of God. He stays the same no matter what. Bill? Yes. No, that's perfect. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, last slide. Verse 11. So nothing changes, nothing satisfied, nothing is new, everything fades away. And this is, Mary, your comment was a perfect segue. Former things are forgotten, which is actually the fate of all things. All things will be forgotten. Even those who are yet to come, the people who come after all of us, they will be forgotten. We will be forgotten. So what should this teach us? It's really the same lesson we've been talking about all along, and it really goes to what Matt was talking about and what Phil was talking about. Don't focus on the things. Focus on God, who is constant. Renew your mind. In fact, my takeaway is the good life does exist once you stop wanting a better one than you have now. Okay, that's all I have. Thank you for your participation.